In the last few days, the Wall Street Journal reported that President Toomas Ilves would not be offended if he were described as a geek. I hope they're right because I got this through Google. And on his desk is a 27-inch iMac. He owns a MacBook Air and an iPad 2 as well. President Ilves is a former ambassador to the United States and Canada, and as Estonian foreign minister, he began the negotiations that led to his country joining the European Union in 2004. He's been the president there since 2006 and is now a year or so into his second term. At a previous Google Big Tent in The Hague, participants heard a contribution from the Secretary of State of the United States, Hillary Clinton. This evening, we're joined by the man who advises Secretary of State Clinton on innovation. He helps to advance the State Department's interests on issues ranging from internet freedom to disaster response to regional conflicts. He was an advisor to the Obama Technology, Media and Telecommunications Policy Committee and was a member of the Obama-Biden transition team. Would you welcome, please, President Ilves and Alec Ross. Well, I suppose a good place to start might be your reaction, first of all, or a response to the transparency report, President.
Well, we do well, so obviously I'm very pleased. I mean, Freedom House considers us the #1 country in internet freedom. #2 is the U.S. and #3 is Germany. So I'm not surprised that we did so well.
Yeah, but how did that situation come about? Are there particular risks that maybe Estonia took that other countries might balk at?
Well, I mean, since Estonia's success, insofar as we are successful, is very much does hinge very much on widespread application of IT, especially internet-based IT, from voting online to taxes online to e-health, that people are willing to, I mean, the internet is seen as a sort of a motor for development and innovation rather than as something that is not to be trusted. In fact, the government is very supportive of efforts to get greater access to the internet. And of course, the other side, I would say that being a former communist country with extreme allergy to any kind of censorship, it's not something that wins votes.
And I know you don't want to spend too much time talking about your own country in particular, but it was interesting that last year some 1,000 Finnish entrepreneurs began businesses online in Estonia using their Finnish electronic ID cards. Now, what incentivized them? How did that all come about?
Well, I think I think that there's a difference in tax rates, but secondly, you can in fact among the various things you can do with your chip card or your access card, you can, which I mean, Finns have as well, and they are mutually compatible, you can in fact register a company or do all kinds of other things. You can't vote, though. I mean, you have to be Estonian.
I want to come back to that one, actually. It's a particular resonance for people in this country. Alec, we heard from Vince Cerf earlier talking about perhaps the debate that's going on about the possibility of or how to deal with harm and how it results from the internet, and the possibility, as he thought, that the cure could be worse than the disease. What are your own thoughts on that?
Well, not surprisingly, I agree with Vint. Now that the world has become as connected as it has, with literally billions of internet users using billions of devices to connect to the internet, what's happened is government has woken up and has figured out the power of these networks. And a lot of what we've seen over the last 3 years is that the connectivity of the citizenry oftentimes comes at the expense of the state. I think that there's a massive shift in geopolitical power from hierarchies, including government, to citizens and networks of citizens. And frankly, hierarchies, including government, oftentimes don't like giving up power. And so in the face of this loss of control, and in the face of this loss of power, I think we see a lot of governments lashing out and trying to regain control of an inherently uncontrollable space. And so I see monsters under the bed a little bit on this one. You know, I think that there are a lot of very negative impulses among governments, oftentimes within intelligence services and law enforcement services, specifically to try to bend inherently open platforms into something that the state can command.
But you, President, talked, I think last week at a conference about how it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's very good, and we saw what happened last year in the Middle East. But I think you said that the internet can strengthen the hand of the savvy authoritarians and mobsters, allowing them to censor dissent and bully their people.
Well, in fact, I believe that we perhaps may be, and already are, but in the future will be sort of have a new battleground for, a battle that's been going on ever since the 18th century between liberal democracy and authoritarianism. And authoritarians, as we saw during the various revolutions, not only censored the internet, shut off the internet, they have also used modern technologies to track people, to arrest people, to find out where they are. And so I'd say that the whole idea of, we are entering a new phase of liberal democracy, fighting for its values against authoritarian regimes that are perfectly computer savvy and with Western company, sort of assistance, buying technologies to track people and to find out where they are and arrest them and so forth. So I think that we're just at the beginning of something that could be quite challenging for all of us.
Yeah, my boss, Hillary Clinton, put this perfectly when she said, our information networks are like nuclear power. They can fuel a city or destroy it. And so what's interesting is that one of the downsides of the increasing power of network technologies is that these network technologies can now be used to oppress one's people. Now, it's overwhelmingly the case, I believe, that network technologies tend to empower citizens relative to the state. However, that hasn't kept countries from investing billions, if not tens of billions of dollars into the next generation of technologies which will allow them to infiltrate, monitor, and manipulate content on the internet, identify dissent, and arrest the dissenter. A lot of people point to the Arab Spring as sort of the wake-up call for authoritarian countries around the world. I actually would trace it back a little bit earlier to the Green Movement in June of 2009. I think that we saw there very publicly how in this case the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the Iranian government worked to try to bend networks to their own advantage in that regard. And so I think that we have to recognize that that network technologies contribute to both the promise and peril of our time. Again, I think it overwhelmingly advantages dissent to dictators, but we have to be clear-eyed about it.
I would say, just to repeat what Vince Cerf said here before, under the guise of actually regulating fairly technical issues, there is clearly going on, and there's an attempt to impose a certain kind of new world order on IT at the Dubai conference, very similar to my mind to those people who are old enough to remember the new information order that was being pushed through the UN in the middle 80s, which then basically died because the wall fell. But the Soviet Union and other not so democratic countries were trying to basically find legal mechanisms to regulate journalism. And now we see what at least there is the potential of, under the guise of technological regulation, getting to the point of regulating again the content of the internet, and that's clearly something that liberal democracy should be very alert to.
What are your own observations, President, about the whole Wikileaks episode? It unleashed and released a huge amount of classified information. There were all sorts of warnings that people would be put in harm's way, despite the efforts on the part of those who did the leaking to avert that happening. But, was any huge damage done?
I think that it'll take decades to repair the damage done to trust in diplomatic discussions. I mean, any kind of serious discussion with another diplomat. Well, I mean, in the case if you're talking, especially to an American diplomat, but I mean, you could do the same thing to.
Well, we're going to hear shortly from a man who was discomforted to some extent by something that emerged about his communications with the American embassy here. But they get over these things.
No, not everybody.
No, you don't get over the lack of trust. I mean, that feeling that, well, what I'm saying right now in confidence actually may appear. I mean, that's when that trust is broken, it's very hard to get it back.
Yeah, let me say two things about this, especially since, one of the subtexts here is on the issue of transparency. I think it's naive to think that all diplomatic communication should be done live streamed. I do not believe in hyper-transparency. I think that there are still very necessary confidential communications, particularly in the diplomatic realm. So I don't take sort of a utopian view of we should put a webcam in every office of every government official around the world and sort of live stream what's taking place there. I think that does not lend itself to producing a good outcome. That's thing one. Thing two is, I think WikiLeaks actually, in another respect, proves one of the points that I was making earlier about how power is diffusing to citizens and networks of citizens, occasionally at the expense of the state. The WikiLeaks would not have been physically possible 10 years ago. The combination of processing power and bandwidth available at the desktop of a 22-year-old Army private would have been insufficient to download 250,000 plus alleged cables. Further, the WikiLeaks organization is made up largely of members and followers instead of paid staff, a web address instead of a street address. It's a truly transnational, largely virtual organization. Such a thing is truly, characteristic of this moment in time. And so in the same manner in which, I was talking earlier about how our connectedness can contribute to both the promise and peril of our time, you can see the degree to which these networks can work on behalf of the state, or in the case of WikiLeaks, against the interests of my country.
I suppose, President Ilves, the point that you made, and it's under the WikiLeaks episode, it underlines the point you made recently that effectively right now there's a kind of anarchy on the internet. How is that going to play out in your view? I mean, is order ever going to be imposed?
Well,
or should it even be?
I'm not sure I would want that much order. On the other hand, I think that most of us would not want our credit card passwords to be published online. I think these are the kinds of issues we're going to be dealing with more and more. When Lulzec or Anonymous goes and publishes 250,000 passwords, is it in the whose interest is that? Privacy becomes a very key issue here as well. So I'm not. Anarchy would be the wrong word, I would say. But certainly these are issues that we have to think about much more deeply. And of course, on top of that, what I think is a much more dangerous trend is actually what this pernicious public-private partnership that we see in authoritarian regimes together with these, various groups, the people who do spam, who can also do botnets, in collusion with governments that refuse to give out cyber criminals. I think we will be more and more obsessed with these kinds of issues in the future.
There was a fairly lively debate, I gather, at Dublin Castle this morning about the whole question of hate speech, and the argument went back and over about whether there should be criminal sanction against that or whether the answer actually to hate speech was more freedom of speech. What do you think, Alec?
So I have to say that I wasn't actually present for that specific debate, so I'll respond to it in sort of general terms, which is to say simply that, our view is that the best solution to hateful speech is more speech. It's really been I'll put this in sort of personal terms. It's been very interesting to me just on my Facebook page. I'll post something there and, 30, 40, 50 people will sort of write comments, and I'll see a couple comments, and, it'll just make me cringe, and I'll be enraged at the person who said something, and, my sort of instinct as a human being is to be like, well, to hell with you, delete. But then I'll be like, you know what, you have to live by your own values, let's not respond in anger to what somebody just posted there. Let's see what happens. And then what's really interesting is that if you let the discussion unfold, The speech, again, I'm speaking personally and in terms of what I see on my own Facebook page, the conversation will unfold in a way that the person who has said the hateful thing is isolated and their view is marginalized and minimized because of the commentary that comes from far larger numbers of people.
As perhaps the only president on earth who's taken to Twitter to defend his country's honour in economic argument, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think there are even more. I mean, it gets worse or better. I don't know. I mean, in the sense of you have astroturfing. You have. I mean, we know that there are secret services that, in fact, in authoritarian countries, that have people who will then go online to bash people who are. I mean, we see.
That's who's on my Facebook page, President. That's who's putting those comments on my Facebook page.
Absolutely. I mean. Maybe. I mean, it may, in fact, be that. And the point is that, I mean, clearly, this is an example of authoritarian, repressive regimes using the new technology, using the social media in order to strike back, sway opinion, move it in a different direction, or take. I mean, one of the sort of more pernicious thing that it happens is that if, as you see sometimes some liberal Democrats will make a statement in a repressive country, and then it's clear the discussion is taken elsewhere, and it's a completely fake discussion. On the other hand, I mean, I think we need to be able to, we have to learn to live with that. That's what happens.
To move to another topic, the whole debate about copyright, Alec. Again, there's a view that everybody should have free access to everything. And yet, if you look at, say, you can say that, for instance, newspapers are victims of the forces of economic history. They're becoming obsolete. They're closing down, and there are dozens all over the world. And yet, without the work of those journalists, you don't have the quality of information. It won't endure, presumably, into the future. So is there some sort of a way of doing it other than being so expert and so specialist as the Financial Times or the Economist might be, that you can actually monetize the work?
So first, I mean, I don't think you can take the view that there's no place for intellectual property on the internet. I think that takes an enormous number of people's livelihoods and just throws it out the window. The question is, to go back what Vint Cerf was saying, is what is the cure going to be to that? So in the case of the United States, as pieces of legislation like SOPA and PIPA were proposed, we made the determination within the administration that in this case the proposed cure was worse than the illness itself, or out of balance to the problem. So we said that anything that threatened lawful free expression while seeking to protect intellectual property would be something that the president would veto. So in this case, we took a strong stand for free expression. One could say potentially at the expense of intellectual property holders. What I hope happens, there are lots of people like me, and their pinstripe suits and red ties talking about these issues. What I hope happens is that there's actually some engineering-based solutions to this problem. So when I've spoken with CEOs from Southern California who represent the media and entertainment industries, and speak to the CEOs in Northern California from the internet companies, what I say is, can you guys get together and talk about some engineering solutions as opposed to statutory or regulatory solutions? What I hope is that there are actually technological innovations in watermarking or other such things that can do things to protect intellectual property holders, so that it's not just the pinstripe suits who will determine how these things are going to be governed on the internet.
Do solutions have to mean restrictions?
Well, I mean, let's face it. If you're going to, if you want artists to do what they're doing, then and be able to quit their day jobs, then in order to create their art, then we have to find some protection for them.
Quick word from each of you about that conference that's coming up in Dubai later in the year, Alec. We heard from Vint that it's going to be an important event. What do you want to see coming out of it?
It is an important event. To date, as of this moment, there are not proposals that have been formally placed on the ledger that would seek to transfer control of the internet to the United Nations. At this point, it's focused on things like fraud protections and roaming. But the United States is paying very close attention to this issue. We do not want to see the multi-stakeholder approach to internet governance broken. It has worked. We need to value the role of civil society. We need to value the role of the private sector, and that means formally vesting them with authority. Internet governance should not be something that is government only.
Well, I could sum it up by saying we don't want another wall in the bricks.
Okay, just two quick questions about politics. You, Alec, were very much a part of the Obama campaign, and that was seen as a groundbreaking one in terms of use of social media, gathering money from little people, so to speak. What do you think election 2012 is going to bring by way of innovation?
So there is a firewall between me and the election, and I'm.
Don't worry. There's nobody in there.
Yeah, nobody's here, right?
Your secrets are safe.
No, in all seriousness, all I know is what I read in the newspaper. When I sit down and meet with my buddies from the 2008 campaign, who now have similar roles in the 2012 campaign, we literally do not talk about the campaign in respect of the firewall between what I'm doing in government and what happens outside of government. You know, that might seem like a line, but it has the virtue of being completely true. Plus, having been in government for the last 3.5 years, I'm frankly somewhat isolated from the most cutting edge innovations. In 2008, I was a lot closer to things that we could mainstream. Now, I guess I'm part of the mainstream, so it's better to get younger folks in there.
I frankly see much greater potential actually in civil society doing new and innovative things. And I'll give you one example, which is 4 years ago, we had a cleanup campaign in my country. It was done by, just sort of green thinking people, but this time one of the chief engineers of Skype, and then one of the chief, which is an Estonian company if you don't know,
we read that.
and an IT logistics company got together, and they came up with an app for iPhone for smartphones that would, in fact, you could take a picture of a garbage dump or something left somewhere. It would transmit the GPS coordinates, and then then the logistics program came in and figured out where to go. And this thing, 4 years ago, had 40,000 people in my country cleaning up on one day, and we cleaned it up. This year, this thing, which you can look up, and it's called letsdoit.org. 91 countries, 6 million people around the world are using this technology that was two guys in their spare time developed as part of a sort of a charity thing. Massive participation around the globe in something that could not have happened without these technologies.
Last word to you. E-voting, we had a dreadful experience with it in this country. 54 million, I think, plus euro, all gone down the drain. We bought these machines. They were deemed not to be effective. They were scrapped. And people have a terror of going down that road again. You have a different experience in Estonia.
Well, you didn't do e-voting. You had machines. When we talk about e-voting in my country, it means that you use your chip access card. And I voted the time before last in my election. I voted for Macedonia. I just took my card, stuck it into the card reader, put in my codes, and voted. You don't need to have machines to do it. You already have the machine. In fact, these days in Estonia, you vote on the phone. And in fact, that's even more secure than with a chip card.
And you can protect the secrecy of the ballot as well.
Well, so far we're doing a rather good job, and it's more accurate than hanging chads.
And you're still the president. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please, your appreciation, please, to President Ilves and to Alec Cross.
Thank you.